I want to thank all of you for doing something very important today, which is you all showed up. It is so important to be active and engaged in our community because it really helps us all advance our very important work. And you're seeing a great slide montage here of Legislative Day, and it was a tremendous day. I can't wait to hear what the folks who went there had to, what they can share with us about their experiences there. It's super important to get involved. Like what they say is, you don't have a seat at the table, you're the meal, right? So recently, in the California Assembly, they passed AB 1481 and 1482, which is on its way to establishing some form of statewide rent control in the state of California. Obviously, nobody is very thrilled with that result, but the question is, what would the result have been had we not been involved in that process? And likely it would have been quite a bit worse for homeowners and homeownership in the state of California if SCCAR and all of our members hadn't been involved in that effort. So what's actually coming out of 1481 and 1482 are very watered down forms of rent control, and they're set to sunset in 2023 anyway, unless they actually get extended. But I think that the lesson there for all of us is that you have to be involved. Another thing that hasn't got a lot of headlines lately is SB 50, the proposal to essentially upzone the entire state of California. That was killed in committee by the committee chair. Just decided not to bring it to a vote before the committee, and that killed it. The whole entire train of SB 50 was derailed because of that, and I have to think it's because people weren't involved strongly enough in bringing pressure to see to it that SB 50 was actually able to come to the floor. So it's very important that realtors, both at the local association level and the state association level and the National Association of Realtors, that everybody get very involved because the stakes are really high and they're only getting higher. So that's one thing that I took away from my recent trips to both Sacramento and Washington, D.C. is that your personal involvement, showing up, calling your assembly people, calling your senators, that really does make a very big difference. So we've got a very big show here today, so I don't want to take up all the time. I think at this point we'll just go on to hear from Randy Turnquist, our esteemed treasurer, past president, an all-around great guy.
Thanks, Zeb. I'll put the check in the mail.
All right.
So, in the past, the treasurer hasn't got up and said anything, which is fine with me, but we just thought, it's appropriate that we do that because people want to know, where's all the money? Where's it going? So just to give you some numbers, not that you have to remember it, but currently we have 1,355 members. 1,296 of those are primary members and 59 are secondary members. Does everybody know what a secondary member is? Okay. No, somebody who belongs at another association also belongs here. And then affiliate members, we have 80. Now get this, we have welcomed 57 new members since the beginning of 2019. Where are all those Mercedes going to come from? One of the things that I just have to mention is that just baffled me is when we go to the CAR meetings, I always try to go to the DRE presentation. One, to see who the inspectors are, meet them, greet them. They're great people that you just go up and ask them questions, whatever you want. But one of the points they brought up is that there's a testing site they have in Southern California that they say is their busiest testing site, where they test 200 people a day for their real estate license. That's just amazing to me. So the last thing I want to talk about is our local dues have remained the same for the last 2 years. Is that a good thing? Yeah. And our super key and tour fees have remained the same this year. Now I just want to ask some questions just kind of off the record, just for you to think about. How many of you want to pay higher dues? There's a few goofballs in here like me.
Like him.
Now, how many of you would think about paying higher dues if you saw there was a goal to reach? Okay? So one of the things that really bothers me is that we have 1,355 members and we can only fit 55 or 60 in this room. What would it cost to double the size of this room? I don't know. But our major source of revenue is our dues fees. So it's just some things to think about. You know, everybody said, well, I don't want to pay more dues. Well, I don't either, really. But if it means something, then maybe it's worth it. So just some food for thought. All right, thank you. Who's up next? Fred and Jennifer.
Randy. Danielle. They're on mine.
I'm going to moderate this fiery discussion. Does anybody else want to legislate for the first time who is also in this room? Anybody that we're missing? That wasn't your first time, was it? That was like your second time, so you don't qualify. All right. So why you qualify for other things, but just not that? Why don't you guys introduce yourselves, please, to the assembled masses here?
Hi there, I'm Maggie Barr. I'm currently in Santa Cruz.
Brandon Tech, I work next door at Main Street Realtors. I'm also the chair of the LGR right now and on the board. Thanks.
Jennifer Watson, Sereno Group, on the board, on the events committee, and most of the other committees.
I don't do that many committees. But Danielle Silvera with Century 21MM out of Watsonville. I'm also a part of MRAC board.
All right, so this is all your first time to the Ledge Day, right? So what made you guys want to go besides our lovely Cadillac bus that we had? What was the determining factor that made you say, hey, you know what, I'm going to go to Ledge Day and spend a whole day?
It was all about the bus, let's get real. I have to say, it was a field trip. If you remember going on field trips as a kid, we didn't have to think. We just showed up, we got on the bus, they took us up there. Our schedule was already set, so we really just followed along. So it was really easy to participate. I'm familiar with Sacramento, but it's like where do you park, where do you go, where are the different hotels. So it was so easy. That's really what was a clincher for me.
Okay, for me it's a chance to just be part of something. You know, Sacramento's over there, this sort of stuff happens. And, you know, I think there's just an opportunity to get closer to see, you know, where decisions are made, and also share time with people going up. And you guys made it easy to do that.
Two reasons really. One is I get frustrated when I hear about things like rent control. I know the state level has a lot to do with what happens, and I just wanted to see more about that process and how can a local agent like me, relatively new in a career, actually impact the state policy about rent control. But also, like you were saying, networking. I mean, the more realtors I know in town, the better my business is going to be, the easier it is for me to get my offers accepted. I want to know all of you really well and spend time with you all. And this was a great opportunity to hang out with like 15 or 16 people I've never met before and spend a day with them and get to know them. So I really appreciated that.
It came back, I thought I was getting rid of it, but I actually, when I was in school, was a student ambassador and national young leader. So I went to Washington, D.C. and represented the U.S., also in Australia. So I was really excited about Sacramento. I was like, okay, this is my geek, this is where I get to see everything, I get to see the behind the scenes from a realtor perspective. And when you actually walk into that room and you see all of these chairs, you're like, there's no way. But to see that many people all representing the realtors of California was so impressive, and the speakers and the way that they spoke about the pride that we have being a realtor was the magnitude behind it was immense. And also a lot of the takeaway from the bus ride was great as well. We got to meet some other realtors, and being a new realtor, you know, the insight that you get from that one-on-one with people that you bond with. You're there all together. You all want to experience this. It's massive. But yeah, a lot of the networking too. The vendors there were great as well. Yeah.
All right, and so why don't we just start with you again? What's like one big like top takeaway, like an aha, or like one really surprising thing that you learned, not just experienced, but like what information did you get that you were like, wow, I didn't know that?
That's a good one, Seth. For me, I think that a lot of it was the one-on-one with some of the other realtors. When you're sitting on a bus together and you're just kind of spitballing ideas and they know that you're a new realtor, and even the other people that weren't new realtors, they just kind of were throwing concepts out there, and people were actually closing escrow basically while we were there, and you know, there's a lot of woos and their offer was accepted, and all that support for me was the biggest thing. Seeing other realtors support other realtors was really huge.
I was impressed by Governor Newsom. He is a dynamic speaker. I wasn't quite sure. I've heard, you know, a lot about his points of view and whatnot, but he seemed very pro-realtor, and he was funny. I'm sure he had a speechwriter, but anyway, I was very impressed. And again, the thousands of realtors all over there. It was amazing.
For me, I was disappointed about the opportunity. I wanted a photo op with Governor Newsom, but that's why they have bodyguards to keep people like anyway. So there was one member who managed to pull it off. And no, it was all about, I was going to joke and say it's all about the pens, the free pens. It's about relationships. And what was striking to me was the fact that, you know, we went, Mark Stone's a great guy. He's been here. Barbara's been a great liaison for us, and she's a real treasure for us, and Robert too. And just the people that get involved in the state level and national. And so it's just, you know, we're in Mark's office, and you know, Mark looked a little terrified, like, whoa, there's 19 of you guys, can back off. But I really got it. It's all about relationships, and it's true for us, right, in our business here. It's true in Sacramento. I mean, Barbara goes up there all the time. Robert knows people. And it's just, you meet these people, and they're just people, right? I mean, and so that's what it was about, building relationships. So that was the big takeaway for that. And the free pass.
So my big aha has to do with being a Boulder Creek realtor and dealing with fire issues. We've had almost, a deadly fire in the last year, and it's just a little scary to know that there's a lot larger risk coming and looming because of global warming and what all these bigger fires in California affect every one of your transactions. Because did you know it's really hard to get homeowners insurance in Boulder Creek right now? There's clients who cannot get insured. And one of the sessions I went to, which was led by my broker, Mike Sevilia, talked about how all the insurance companies are cutting back the number of policies they put in place in high fire risk areas like Boulder Creek and really the whole Santa Cruz Mountainous area. And there's actually a pool. I didn't even know there was a pool for this. I know the auto insurance has a pool for people who are bad drivers and they can't get insurance, but there's actually one for the fire insurance too, which is high. But if the policy premium is too high, it can actually prevent you from getting your loan and getting the house. And so it's really scary. And at a state level, people like Mike Sevilia and people on the Association of Realtors boards at that level are working hard with the insurance industry and with the state to find a way to get insurance for these homeowners in all these high fire risk areas. And so it's a really important program that they're working on and making progress on, and I really appreciate them taking care of that.
All right, so I could ask them a whole bunch of questions, but I thought maybe I'd open it to you folks. Does anyone here have a question for first-time the Ledge Day attendees they might want to ask? Anybody? Anybody? Jamie? You were a first-time Ledge Day attendee. Why are you there?
Because I'm just hanging out listening to what they have to say.
I have a question.
There we go, Pete.
What made you decide to go?
I think for me it's just because I've heard about this. I'm an LGR, local government relations committee, and it's kind of silly that I'm not there.
We shamed him into going, that's right.
It wasn't just shame, but it was just the opportunity to both be with other realtors and to see what's all about. It's how you grow and learn. You got to stay active and learn.
And there is free lunch.
Which was amazing, it was an amazing lunch. It was amazing lunch, we had Robert Rivas come and talk to us at lunchtime, it was fantastic. That was awesome. That was awesome, right? That was awesome. Who's Robert Rivas? He's the assemblyman from Hollister. Yes, Renee Mel, what's your question?
My question is, would you guys go again?
Absolutely, in a heartbeat. I'm one of those people that likes to know kind of behind the scenes what's going on, which is why I'm on almost every committee. But it was fascinating. It's at least a bucket list for everyone, I would say.
Well, to go back to the previous question, Judy Brosey, who's my mentor, goes, "Aren't you going to that?" And I was like, she's like, "Yes, you are. That sounds great." I was like, "Okay, super." But the lunch was really great. Any other questions?
I just want to say too, the Capitol building is fun because it's, I don't know how many have been there, I haven't really been there, and it's not that big, it's a small place really, but it's kind of cool what happens. And the bus ride is fun, I'd love to see more people on that. The bus ride was great, thank you, Seb, for pushing for that.
Yeah, I highly recommend it if for no other reason you need a break. Because it's a day, you get up in the morning, your ledge day all day till you fall asleep at night, and you get to take a day off from your work and your family and commuting and escrows and just stay focused on something bigger than you. And that I appreciated, having an opportunity to take a step back and think about the bigger picture of being a realtor. So.
All right, well, I think that will wrap it up for our Ledge Day interview. Unless you guys have any closing remarks you want to get off your chest before we...
The bus driver, we got to request the same bus driver.
Bob, the bus driver, good guy. Yeah, and there's,
We had a whole stand-up, well, not standing up, but comedy session going over 17. Great.
And you gotta be careful where you sit on the bus, because every back, I sat in kind of a noisy section of the bus. There were some political discussions going on. But anyways, that's-
We are an apolitical group, by the way. All right.
Awesome.
Thank you guys. Let's see here. Well, it looks like I'm next on the agenda, as a matter of fact. All right, and unfortunately, I broke my transitional glasses over the weekend, so I can't read anything anymore. So this is going to be very challenging. But I am tasked here with talking about risk management, right? So there's a risk management forum that they had. So for those of you who don't know, Ledge Day is one day, sort of in the middle of the week, but the whole entire California Association of Realtors spring meeting lasts pretty much all week long. Is it Monday through Friday, or Saturday, Monday through Saturday, or Tuesday through Saturday? It's a long day. CAR has 3 business meetings every year. One is in January, and that rotates around. One is in April, and that is Ledge Days in the middle of that. And the other one is in October or so, usually. And that is coincides with the CAR Expo, right? The trade show, right? So those happen at the same time. So during these spring meetings and all these meetings, you know, they're about 4 or 5 days long. There's a number of committees and forums that they have, and by a number, I mean dozens. I mean, like, there are many, many things for people who go to sit in on and learn from. You know, if you're a CAR director, you get to go. It's sort of expected that you will attend, but any member can attend these things, right? Like, it's free to go. All you have to do is just show up and get a hotel room. So it's definitely worth going to. And one of the greatest sessions that I attended, although there was many incredible forums and committee meetings, was risk management. So I'm going to give you a little update here. Like, I actually have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages of notes that I took at risk management. So we start off with a presentation by Shannon Jones, who is maybe my favorite real estate lawyer. She's really amazing. And she basically said, I'm going to talk about 2 issues today: disclosure issues and agent trouble areas. Agency disclosure, now you only need 2 of those signed. You don't need 3 of those signed anymore. That's pretty nice. Let's see here. She touched on Landslides, if there's a landslide, make sure that you do disclose any kind of prior earth movement on the property and any kind of soil compaction or any kind of soil movement at all. She recommends you guys disclose that. Any kind of water intrusion, any kind at all, she was very adamant about that it must be disclosed because she says that mold claims are once again in vogue. So look out for that. Let's see here. She also said that most E&O carriers do only pay a small amount on E&O claims. So check your E&O insurance policy. It might not be that they pay $1 million on a mold claim. It might be they only pay $100,000 on mold claims. So make sure that anything related to mold that you do disclose that and check your E&O policy to see how you are covered by it. See here, she said that the cannabis, surprise, surprise, is becoming a huge issue. That people may be growing the cannabis legally, but it still must be disclosed. She also said that legally you can't actually sell a property if cannabis is growing on it. Apparently it's a federal regulation because it's a federally backed mortgage or something like that. She said if you have cannabis growing, it cannot be legally sold at that time. So that's interesting, okay? See, also, if they had grown marijuana in the past but no longer do, it still has to be disclosed. As well as any drug use on the property must also be disclosed, even if it's in the past, because there could be residue on the walls or the carpet. She also said that any prior criminal activity whatsoever must be disclosed. She brought up the case of there was a house that had been used as a brothel. That was not disclosed. And so the new owners moved in and people were coming at all hours of the night asking to get in. And that was a problem. So there you go, bring a black light through your properties. When you're doing your advent, bring a black light. Turn off all the lights.
You don't want to know. Don't know, we don't disclose.
That's actually pretty interesting. It's not a question on the TDS or SBQ. Has there been any criminal activity, right? But she's saying you must disclose any prior criminal or illegal activity going on at the property. So that's pretty important. Let's see here. Now here's one thing that was pretty interesting to me, and I've heard this before many times, that you do not have any obligation to pull public records, period. Not only do you not have any obligation, she strongly recommends that you never go to the government, the county, and pull any kind of records whatsoever. That is her recommendation, and she says that buyers are responsible for that. Of course, we all know that, but many realtors have a standard of practice, myself included, where we do go and we do research the property before we market it. But she's saying it's a big no-no, so there you go. Let's see here. Transfer disclosure statement. And she says if you're the listing agent, do not turn over the task of a TDS to anybody on your team, anybody else in your brokerage. If you are the listing agent, then you do that. You make sure that paperwork is signed by you and not given to anybody else. Same thing with the AVID. She says the person who does the AVID should also do the TDS, should not be outsourced to anybody else on your team or any other member of your brokerage. If you're a listing agent, you need to be doing the AVID and you need to sign the TDS. Let's see here. Nuisances, right? So a nuisance is anything you see, hear, or smell, and you must disclose all nuisances. So close your eyes and think, what else could it be? Airplane traffic is a big one now, right? I mean, like they changed the flight patterns, right? A lot of neighborhoods are now experiencing increased air traffic noise. So that would be a nuisance. She gave the example of a bus stop. There was a seller who thought that it was a bonus that there was a bus parked right in front of the house, and the buyer did not disclose that because the seller did not consider that to be a nuisance. The new buyer considered that to be a nuisance, and I guess sued the seller over that one for failure to disclose there's a bus stop right in front of the property. So there you go. That's very important, right? One man's nuisance is another man's godsend, I guess. All right, and she gave a good throwaway line, right? And that is, if it crosses your mind, it should be disclosed. So if you're wondering, should I disclose this? The answer is yes, you should disclose it. If it even comes up as a question, the answer is yes, you should disclose that. Okay, so special assessments. Always let the buyer investigate any kind of special assessments for HOAs. Do not call the property management or the HOA association and ask, because many times HOAs will consider that information confidential and will not tell you, but in my experience, they won't tell the buyer anyway because the buyer isn't the owner anyway. So I'm not sure why she said that, but that's what she said. She said, don't you ask, leave that to somebody else to ask. So there you go, that was her section on disclosures. Agent trouble areas, she said, insurance is becoming a huge issue, both in terms of flood insurance and of course fire insurance. So she said like this used to happen all the time, you'd ask them 3 days before closing, oh, did you get your insurance? Right, that's not the time to ask if they got their insurance. The time to ask if they got their insurance is within their disclosure, is within their inspection contingency period. So make sure that you tell your buyers up front, check insurance first thing. And then she also said it's very important for you to get your buyers to fill out the buyer material issues form. Who has used the buyer material issues form? Carol, then I'll say, of course you have. Pete, of course you have too. Rosemary, you get a prize. Nobody else? Me neither. So you should be using the buyer material issues form to, and basically the reason why she says you should do that is because there have been lawsuits where after a property closes a transaction, the buyer goes and sues the buyer's agent because they say, well, this was very important to me and you never mentioned it, right? So, but if you have the buyer's material issues form, and she gave an example where the buyer did try to do that and the agent actually did have the buyer material issues form, and you said, hey, I asked you specifically to tell me about any material issues you have, and that was not on the list. And so that case was dismissed and the realtor went off scot-free. Okay, so let's see here. Airbnb and VRBO, she says that increasingly municipalities are doing this, and courts have ruled it is okay to limit Airbnb and VRBO. So please make sure that you check with that. And also, she said, have the buyers check the CCNRs about that. And she said the agents should not review or interpret CCNRs, which is interesting. Okay, so that's just what she said. Your mileage may vary. All right, marketing and Photoshop, she said it's becoming increasingly common, like boxbrownie.com, which is actually backed by NAR, where they, enhance photos, right? So it's okay to enhance photos, but they should still accurately represent what the property actually looks like, right? So you can't change counters or paint colors or anything like that. Okay, so let's see here. Tenants, she said rent control is very dangerous, and that if you have a property in an area with rent control and there's a tenant, it is a landmine, and to never ever get involved with the tenants, leave that to the seller or the seller's attorney. So when it comes to any kind of issues around eviction or leases or anything like that, make sure that the seller deals with that or the seller's attorney. Staging, she says, this is shocking. Don't paint over stains on the wall and not disclose it. That's what she said. So she also suggested, and this is innovative, doing an avid before you make any kind of repairs or improvements to the property, and then another avid after. She also so much as suggested that you should take a whole series of photos and video before you do any work, and then turn that over to the buyer as well. So, handy tip there. Seller financing is making a comeback, and she said, do not work on any kind of seller financing documentation yourself. Make sure that is handled by an attorney. Holding open houses for agents and other brokerages. That's not a good idea. She said don't do that, and she gave a whole litany of reasons why, but the big reason she recommended not doing that is because an agent is doing an open house and a neighbor comes to the open house, tells that agent some juicy gossip tidbit like, hey, they're going to be building a strip mall across the street next week. That agent knows about it, fails to tell the listing agent, who then fails to tell the seller. Buyer buys the property, finds out that there's a strip mall going in next door across the street. The same neighbor comes back with a bag of cookies and says, welcome to the neighborhood. And then they've got to talking, and then the neighbor says, oh yeah, I told the agent this was happening, they didn't tell you. And so it's a very big problem. So this was based on a real case, and everybody ended up getting sued, of course. So don't let that happen to you. And then one other thing she brought up about that is the idea of imputed knowledge. And so basically the law says that anything you as an agent know, that means that your seller also knows that. So if you know something and you don't tell that to the seller, then that's bad on you because the seller legally knows anything that you know as the agent, right? So you are not able to not share any information, and any information you have, you just can't sit on it. It has to be shared with the seller and has to be disclosed because you are not doing your fiduciary responsibility unless you make sure you tell the seller everything that you know as well and make sure that you understand that they have a duty to disclose all that stuff. Okay, so that is most of what she had to talk about. Then she had a Q&A session, which was very informative also. Let's see here. You have no liability if you are an agent and after you close escrow, the insurance company cancels the insurance policy. That's actually happened to some clients of mine up in Felton. They got their insurance canceled about 2 months after they closed escrow because the farmers didn't want to do insurance anymore. That's not your fault. Can't be held liable for that, she said. Let's see here. And she does recommend that if you are going to have a buyer waive all their contingencies prior to going into contract, that she says, first of all, don't do that. Second of all, if you do that, make sure that you have them sign the BIW, the buyer inspection waiver, as part of that offer. Let's see here. Yeah, also she says that you should actually send that in a separate email. There was some kind of discussion about all this docu-signing things, just click here, click there, right? She talked about that you should really make sure that you document your discussions of these forms with your clients, and that if you do have a client who does not want to do inspections, make sure they sign the BIW and the BIA, the Buyer's Information Advisory. She recommends that you send that again in a separate email and say very clearly, you know, like, hey, if you're thinking about doing this, make sure you read the Buyer's Inspection Advisory before you sign that offer. They did talk about, they had a home warranty person come up after Shannon Jones, and it was kind of a sales pitch for home warranties. What a lovely idea, she said. Let's see here. Okay, I'm not going to talk too much about that. Oh, here we go. They had somebody from the Escrow Officer Association of California, the actual name of the association. But she said that escrow officers can be certified and do have a continuing education requirement. And so she said, ask if your escrow officer is CEA certified. I guess that's California Escrow Officer Association. Let's see here. Solar leases. Nothing really interesting there. Wire fraud. Oh yes, she said there's wire fraud insurance. You can actually get wire fraud insurance. So you can check into that. Let's see here. Oh, there was a big discussion about the statewide Section 8, right? So like there's a move afoot to essentially require that landlords accept Section 8 tenants. There was some discussion about that. I don't think it's actually happened yet. There's actually a bit of a bone of contention between SCCAR and NAR about counting Section 8 income as a form of income that you can count to qualify for a property. So that's coming down the road. Maybe, maybe not. It's to be decided. Let's see here. Oh, yeah, so this is actually one big thing they talked about there too, was the fact that cities and counties are not following the new state rules regarding the construction of ADUs. And if you do have a situation like that where the government is basically breaking the law, that the SCCAR now has a new legal foundation. Anybody heard about this? SCCAR actually is forming a non-profit organization to help homeowners fight government overreach. So that's actually very interesting as well. So if you have any cases like that where you are seeing that a local government is not allowing a homeowner to do what the state of California says they should be able to do, SCCAR will, with their legal foundation, will help you bring a lawsuit against that government agency. So that's really cool. All right, let's see here. Effective July 1st, all new garage door openers will have to have a battery backup, because apparently that was a problem. Somebody got trapped in the garage in a fire and it didn't end well. So now there is battery backups requiring as of July 1st.
So that's a retrofit for every home you
No,
sell?
it's just new garage
Okay.
door openers will have
So
to
if
have
you
them.
replace it, but you don't have to replace it.
You don't have to go and replace them,
Got it.
yes, exactly right, but maybe you want to, maybe it's a good thing to know about, that there are, who knew there's battery backup garage door openers? Now you know. Let's see here, if you have a daycare in a house, you have to have it tested for lead every 3 years in the water. And you cannot stop a tenant from opening a daycare in a property, that's interesting, if you're renting a property, the tenant is free to open a daycare and have as many kitties as they want to, at least as much as the law allows. Let's see here. Yes, was that a surprise?
Yeah.
Right, well now you know, so if your tenant wants to open a daycare, nothing you can do to stop that from happening. All right, and then, and here's another question, so, like if a tenant fails to pay the rent, you can of course evict them, but what if they are 1 cent short on the rent? Can you fail to evict them, can you evict them if they're 1 cent short on the rent? The answer is?
Yes.
No, you can't. You can't evict them if they are 1 cent short because the courts have ruled that it has to be a reasonable amount short, but of course they stop short of actually defining what reasonable is. So there you go. You cannot evict them if they're 1 cent short on the rent. Emotional support animals. It is okay to. And this is a big thing, right? Like tenants want to move in with their emotional support, snake or whatever, python. So here's another thing: is that it is actually okay to deny them if it is reasonable to do so. So what's reasonable? She said a gorilla. It would be reasonable to not allow a gorilla. All right. Lots of tidbits in there, and that pretty much brings it to the end of everything I heard in risk management. Hope you guys learned something. All right, next we have my good friend and colleague, Renee Mello. Renee.
Let me ask you, can you hear me without the microphone? Okay.
Can my camera hear you though?
Oh, can the camera hear me? Okay, we get to talk about forms. Anyway, there's 3 forms that are being released in June of 2019, which as far as I know is now. The first is a purchase agreement probate addendum. Basically, instead of doing the probate listing contract, you can do the addendum with the regular residential listing agreement. So it covers everything that you need for the probate. The other form is really kind of interesting. It's a photo and video agreement and release. And at first I thought it was something that it's not. When I read it, I found out that it's basically if a real estate agent takes pictures, and they take pictures of the house, they take pictures of the dog, they take pictures of the people. This form is a form that needs to be signed by those people that they have taken pictures of, saying that they can use these pictures however they want to use them. That the realtor can use them however they want to use it. And on the form, it actually has a place where you have to designate and identify who the broker is. Yes, Fred?
Is this only for when you take pictures of people?
Yes.
As opposed to the house?
Well, and the house, because they have to have,
So this is every house?
yes,
Okay.
and subject, well, it says used for any pictures taken by real estate licensee of either home and or people.
So that would be everything.
That'd be everything.
So then if a professional photographer takes them, it's not, you don't.
Right,
Okay.
right. It's if you take it as a real estate agent. What's that form called? It is called the Photo and Video Agreement and Release.
So if a professional photographer takes the photos, you're not required to
Right.
have it up.
Right. Because the person that is, it says real estate licensee.
Okay.
It's if you take your little,
I just want to be clear, I wouldn't assume that a professional photographer can, because they give you the photos, so then you use them any way you want. I would think it would be.
Yeah, but they still own them. You don't own them.
right. This is, you own these, and that's part of the release that they sign, is that you own them. And get to use them however you want to use them. And then the third form that's being released is a Wildfire Advisory. I think we've talked about that in 3 or 4 different ways. And what it does is it tells somebody who's buying a property in a wildfire potential area and one that has happened. If someone wants to buy a property in Paradise right now, basically what you would need to disclose is that there's gonna be trucks they're rebuilding, there's gonna be a lot of action going on, so this lets them know about that. Okay, so then the June 2019 revised drafts, the seller's affidavit of non-foreign status, what they have done, excuse me, is acknowledge the qualified substitute, has the ability to get the signature of the seller, and provide the qualified substitute the information in paragraph 4, which is the social security number or the corporate number. And the information should be completed after this form is provided to the buyer so that the buyer doesn't have that particular number. Agent visual disclosure. They added a place where you can actually check mark and add an addendum if you have additional stuff. If the avid does not give you enough lines to identify everything that's challenging about a particular home, you can now check mark something and have an addendum. Buyer inspection, election and buyer inspection waiver. The buyer inspection election adds as part of the introduction, this form is intended for the use between a buyer and a buyer's broker. It does not alter the legal or contractual relationship between the buyer and seller. And then it adds paragraph D, buyer may elect to change these elections during buyer's investigation period. If buyer does not investigate any of these items during the contractual investigation period, buyer may lose the right to investigate these items later. Basically, if you say, I'm not going to do any investigations, and then you go, well, maybe I'll do one, but you've done it after the contingency period, you will not be able to do that. And then the buyer inspection waiver is actually adds at the beginning again. This form is intended for use between a buyer and a buyer's broker. It does not alter the legal and contractual relationship. It deletes all references to disclosures, which makes sense. The disclosures are going to be given anyway. So in the buyer inspection waiver, it actually talked about reports/disclosures. It went through and just deleted all the disclosures. And paragraph 4 says waivers of additional investigations recommended by other reports. So it includes, if you were to have a property inspection, it says that the roof needs to be done. If you don't do the roof, it is a waiver, it would be officially a waiver. Buyer and tenant non-agency agreement. I don't think a lot of people are doing tenant stuff, but it just says that first paragraph added, if checked, this form is being provided in connection with the leasehold interest. The term seller shall mean landlord and the term buyer shall mean tenant. So it's just clarification. Modification. How many people knew there was a modification of listing, buyer representation, and other agreement between principal and broker? Because I've had people ask, how do you modify or change a listing agreement? There is a form. And what this talks about is they've actually added a little paragraph that says the amount or rate of real estate commission is not fixed by law. They are set by each broker individually and may be negotiated between seller and broker. Real estate commissions include all compensation and fees to broker. The notice of termination of tenancy, what they've done there is there's different options that you can choose, or there's an option you can choose about why you're doing the termination. What they did is they included or. I guess some people were checking more than one. So it just outlines or says or. Buyer pre-occupancy storage addendum, if you allow the buyer to move their stuff into the house before close of escrow. It adds in paragraph 11, damage and insurance, as well as any damage caused at either move in or move out or otherwise to seller's real or personal property. So it includes the time frame, whether you're moving in or out, and any damage that you do to the property.
What's the name of that one again?
Excuse me?
Can you say the name of that again?
The name of that was the buyer pre-occupancy storage addendum.
Thank you.
Representation capacity, signature disclosure. What they've done is, and I'm gonna, instead of going through this because What they've done for the representation capacity for signature disclosure for the buyer, for landlord, for seller representations, and for tenant representatives has all been changed. What they're doing is they're trying to make it more consolidated. So my suggestion would be, if you're interested in really reading what's coming down the road, you go to CAR, you go to meetings, you go to the forms agenda, and it will give you, so you can look at each of these forms. If I went through all of this, I would lose you all, and don't want to do that. Receipts for reports, number deleted. Tenant estoppel certificates has been added to the receipt for reports. Seller or landlord non-agency agreement, seller or landlord is added. Additive check, this form is being provided in connection with a leasehold, so you know it's a leasehold, not a sale. Trust advisory, they've added the fact that carbon monoxide devices have to be put into the house, even though it's being sold in the trust or whatever. Tenant in possession addendum. Basically what this is saying is that if the tenant stays in possession and the buyer is going to keep the tenant in, seller shall give buyer written notice of any changes to existing leases or tenancies, new agreements to lease, rent, and changes to the status of the condition of the property at least 7 days prior to making any of the changes. And then if the buyer shall within 5 days say they want to remove the contingency or cancel the agreement, or they can actually say, I don't want the landlord to, I don't want you, Mr. Seller, to do any of these things. And the seller has to comply. So again, if that applies to you. And then there's some revised forms that are going to come in December. I'm not going to go into detail. But one of them that they're looking at has to do with seller's instruction to include listing from multiple listing services and days on market. So I have a feeling this is going to go into a lot more discussion, because there's real talk about when should the clock start ticking. So again, that's something. And then there's actually a summary of an offer. There's going to be a form that allows you to summarize the offer when you present it to the buyer. Or when you present it to the seller. You're going to be summarizing the buyer's offer, and then that was painless. And with that, I'd like to invite Candy up to talk about Coastal Commission.
Welcome. Hello. I'm first going to talk about REFAT. There's a couple of topics I'm going to talk about. First is REFAT, which is Real Estate Fraud Advisory Team. And this started a couple years ago by the district attorneys in Santa Cruz, Monterey, and San Benito counties, and we meet quarterly. And it's composed of anybody in the real estate community and anybody in law enforcement and the title companies. And the last meeting, it was probably 2/3 law enforcement. They were there. It's very interesting. Jeff Oboyski was the speaker. He is the Assistant Commissioner of Enforcement from the DRE. And he said the consumer protection is their highest statutory authority. He also said, this is very interesting, that Zillow and other tech companies are getting into the real estate business by offering to purchase your home. And Zillow already has a presence in California in Riverside. So Zillow will be getting their real estate license. We knew it was coming, and it's here. So it's going to be called Zillow Offers, and they are saying they'll purchase your home in 48 hours. In 24 hours, they will have someone out to your house to inspect it, like a home inspector. And in 48 hours, they will give you a cash offer to purchase your home. So DRE has been meeting with them to make sure that they do have a real estate license, and they're working on that. That they do have a physical presence, because as a tech company or anybody who has a broker's license, you have to have a physical location in California. Other states you do not, but in California you do. And they're also discussing the statutes that regulate broker supervision of salespersons in California. So we'll see what happens. So the other, next, they talked about virtual brokerages or cloud brokerages, and they are on the rise in California. Again, they have to have a physical location. So right now, they're truly virtual in California because they do have to have a location. There are 70 violations as of 5/15, which is where we met, May 15th, against a virtual brokerage. And this is mostly about lack of supervision. And the DRE is monitoring their virtual brokerages very carefully for fraud, and they're especially concerned about fraud with virtual brokerages without supervision during a downturn, which they think will be coming soon. Let's see. There has been a fraudulent changing of e-license information. So right now they're working on a program that will send an email out to anyone who changes any information on the DRE website, so that to verify that that was a legitimate change. And then wire fraud is still a major concern and growing, and especially with the title companies. Next, so then we meet quarterly. It's open to anybody in the real estate industry. We alternate locations, and it's open to anyone if anybody is interested in going to the next one, which is October 8th. This one will be in Santa Cruz. If you're interested in going, let me know. I don't know what the location is right now. Next is Realtors Coastal Commission Issues Group. So for several years, a small group of us have been complaining and trying to trading stories about the horrors of the Coastal Commission. CAR has finally listened to us, and they have established the Realtor Coastal Commission Issues Group. And the purpose of the group is to address alternate courses of action for CAR to address the Coastal Commission's accountability for its infringement of property rights via legislative action, political agreement and compromise litigation, bureaucratic accountability measures, and public and media outreach. So we've hired, I believe the consultant has been hired. The consultants were interviewed. We got from Impact $250,000 for a consultant, and this will be like a GAD, that GAD type position for the Coastal Commission to try to consolidate everything and keep us informed. So each association, the associations who are part of it right now are mostly coastal associations, but any association can join. Santa Cruz County Association contributed their $1,500 to help fund it. Rosemarie and I are the members for this association on the committee. So if anyone has anything they would like to report, Rosemarie and I will be happy to listen to you and report back to the committee. Next are two committees that met during the spring conference at Sacramento. The first is the Homeownership Housing Committee, and we looked at 5 bills. The first one was SB 330, Housing Crisis Act of 2019, and it seeks to speed up the development process. CAR did a support if amended position to mirror deed restriction requirements in existing law for the construction of affordable owner-occupied housing. So that means it really goes to deed restrictions for 45 years for owner-occupied housing and 55 years for rental housing. Next was SB 5 to establish local state sustainable investment incentive program. This proposes to reduce local contributions to the Education Revenue Augmentation Fund to fund affordable workforce housing programs. SB 5 seeks to backfill local education revenue funds accounts with the state's general fund. CAR's position right now is a watch. Next is mobile home park tenancies, and CAR's position is opposed unless amended to eliminate provisions that require the mobile home park to offer tenancy under the same terms and conditions that were in place prior to destruction of the mobile home park. So like Paradise, they're totally destroyed. The owners have to reconstruct it, build it again, they put money into it, they make improvements, and they have to offer the same terms and conditions to the tenants, which is not fair to the landlords or to the owners. Next is common interest development management. This is kind of crazy. This requires a managing agent for a homeowners association whose management agreement has been terminated to produce a client's physical property and records like operations of equipment, manuals, security gate transponders, pool keys, within 30 days of written request. So CR's position is support. And the last one for homeownership housing, is accessory dwelling units for sale or separate conveyance for nonprofits. And we're seeking to amend to mirror deed restriction requirements instead of in perpetuity for the construction of accessory dwelling by a nonprofit corporation. The next committee was Investment Housing Committee. This was pretty interesting. The first issue we addressed was for CAR to appoint a rental housing legislative advisory group to provide expertise to CAR on critical landlord-tenant issues that may arise during the remainder of the 2019 session. There are several just cause rent control bills that are on the table in the Assembly, and we would not be meeting again until September, so there would be time to provide feedback to the lobbyists. So this bill allowed them to negotiate on our behalf and on behalf of property rights. So in the past, CR has had an opposed position on anything with rent control and just cause issues, and in fact on the bills that I'm going to talk to you about. However, due to the current political environment and public sentiment, these bills are likely to pass. An opposed position like we've traditionally done would have meant that we don't have a seat at the table, we can't negotiate, and who knows what we would get. An opposed unless amended position allowed our lobbyists to negotiate on our behalf and on behalf of our best interests. CR has always been and will continue to advocate for property rights. However, since these just cause and rent control bills are a governor's priority, a legislative leadership priority, and a high political feasibility of passing, we knew that a not support position would not be to our advantage. So we, again, in order to negotiate, we did an oppose unless amended. So, AB 1482, statewide rate cap. Or opposed unless amended. The amendments we included were we wanted to establish a cap on rent, include an yet specified single-family and condominium exemption, include a sunset date, and protect vacancy decontrol, which is currently in the bill. So last week, AB 82 passed in the Assembly, and the lobbyists did an amazing job because we have a rent cap of 7% plus inflation, which is usually 2.5%. Single-family homes and condos are exempt. A sunset date is 2023, and the vacancy control is protected. It's now on its way to the Senate. AB 1481 and AB 1697, which were just cause, are inactive at this point in time. So they will probably be back next year. We did take a position of oppose unless amended, just in case, but right now it doesn't look like they will be back this year. SB 50, which was mentioned earlier, will be back next year. It was, last year it was a bill, this year it was a bill. Wiener's not going to give up, and it's an amazing bill, so we will see it again. And then the others are really, really short. So AB 36 modifies the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act. And CAR took a position of oppose unless amended. And the amendments are to remove the 20-year rolling new construction exemption and apply an as yet unspecified hard date, a new construction amended exemption currently. That didn't make sense, sorry. Remove the limited exemption for 10 units for rent-controlled jurisdiction for landlords who are natural persons, and instead include an on-yet specified single-family and condo exemption. And ensure that no new jurisdictions may enact a rent control ordinance if the rent cap AB 1482 is signed into law. And hopefully that will be signed into law. SB 521 establishes a tax credit for rental property owners for dwellings or units that are rented or leased to persons receiving assistance under Section 8. This is a great incentive and can expand their Section 8 housing. CAR supports this. AB 1110, rent increase notice requirements. We have a watch position on this. This heightens notice requirements to 90 days if rent is increased more than 10% and 120 days if rent is increased more than 50%. And that CAR, in conjunction with NAR, opposed the new 14-day inspection period for HUD Section 8 housing. It's currently 120 days, and 14 days notice doesn't give a landlord enough time. So thank you very much. Next up is Morgan.
Morgan.
Good morning. I am Morgan Lukina. As Kathy said earlier, I'm your president-elect. I'm also a state director with CAR. In my role at CAR, I am our regional representative for the Transaction and Regulatory Committee. This committee evaluates legislation and regulation over 4 specific areas. That is licensing, liability and risk management, real estate finance, and transactional issues. So we review proposed legislation and ballot measures, and the committee decides what position they think CAR should take on each issue. So at our meetings in Sacramento this past month, there were 6 issues, and I will review those now. The first 3 are state issues. The first one regards the California Consumer Privacy Act. And the motion was that CAR support legislation which limits the problematic impacts of the California Consumer Privacy Act, or the CCPA, and oppose legislation relating to the CCPA that would negatively impact the real estate industry as it relates to the CCPA. So a little bit of background on this one. AB 375, or the CCPA, was passed last year. So 2019 allows for cleanup legislation, and then it'll go into effect in 2020. So the CCPA is an old law that enacts the most consumer-friendly privacy protections of any state in the country. If not amended, it will be very costly to small business owners and realtors. It would also greatly affect the MLS and the way that they operate. Failure to fully disclose to a consumer also exposes us to legal liability. Although the CCPA does not have a private right of action right now, the Attorney General is sponsoring a bill in this legislative session that seeks to add one. And if this is accomplished, individual consumers could sue brokerages, individual salespersons, the MLS, as for alleged failure to disclose, delete, or honor opt-outs. So everyone's sending all those email campaigns that people don't feel that they have the right to be able to opt out of. That would include that. Happy. Okay. The second one is that CAR support AB 1384, which increases the loan amount from $2.5 million to $4.5 million for specified construction and rehab loans. So a little bit of background there. Existing law regulates real estate brokerages and transactions involving the offering and selling of notes or interest secured directly by interest in real property. So for construction and rehab loans, this is currently limited to $2.5 million. So AB 1384 would increase that to $4.5. The third and final state issue is that CAR support, if amended, AB 1339, which involves mechanics liens priority if the bill disallows subcontractors from filing a mechanics lien against a homeowner when the general contractor has been paid. So, say you remodel your house and and your contract is with the general contractor and you pay the general contractor in full, but then the contractor doesn't pay his sub, and that sub comes and puts a mechanics lien on your property. So CAR supports, if amended, that we take that part out about the subcontractor's ability to file a mechanics lien on the person's property. So the last three are federal issues. This one is that CAR support NAR's mortgage finance reform proposal they are taking to Capitol Hill and advocating as the best solution for reforming Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and the conforming mortgage markets that they serve. This includes turning Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac into heavily regulated utilities known as, stay with me, systematically important mortgage market utilities, which I will refer to as SIMUs. I don't know if that's a thing, but that's what I'm going to call it. So background quickly on this one, that was kind of a mouthful. The proposal would make sure that Freddie and Fannie have greater oversight and regulation. There would be shareholders in the SIMUs with the purpose of placing private equity ahead of taxpayers in the event that they fail. They would continue a public mission of maintaining a liquid mortgage market in all real estate cycles. And there would be a capital reserve large enough to handle a 2007 type crash like we had before. From CAR's perspective, the benefit of setting Freddie and Fannie as SIMUs would be maintaining our 30-year fixed rate mortgage, providing government guarantee in the conforming mortgage market, and protecting high-cost loan limits. The next federal issue is that CAR joined NAR and supported the Treasury Department for the Federal Housing Finance Agency using Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac profits to build a capital reserve fund for them. So a little bit of background on this one. A reserve fund could grow to protect against taxpayers having to step in and cover potential Freddie and Fannie losses. Because the money is not on Freddie and Fannie's books, it would be more difficult for them to just be recapitalized and released without a government guarantee of some kind. The guarantee fees charged by the enterprises, which are Freddie and Fannie, which are intended to be used to cover their risks of guaranteeing against credit loss on loans, would be used to actually cover these losses. Currently, the profits of the fees collected are swept into the Treasury's general fund for non-housing related expenses. So essentially they're working as a tax on homeowners right now. All right, these are exciting. Last but not least, that CAR support the recently announced HUD letter stating FHA loans with debt to income ratios, or DTIs, of over 43% and credit scores below 620 will have to be manually underwritten. So a little bit of background. There has been an increase in the concentration of mortgages with high debt to income ratios and a decrease in average credit scores. And HUD believes these numbers are pointing to an alarming increase in the number of risky loans that the FHA is insuring. So to counter this, HUD has proposed not to stop doing these loans, but rather proceed by having the lenders input the info into an automated underwriting system, and it would trigger it and say, okay, this one meets that criteria, now it has to be manually underwritten. So even when the current automated system approves a loan, an FHA underwriter still must manually verify all the information that goes in there and then sign off on the loan. So right now, 13.6 of all homes sold in California use FHA financing, and for first-time home buyers, this increases up to 23.7%. So the FHA still does play a very vital role in our housing market. CAR believes the impact of this change will impact probably 4% or less of total home sales in California. They don't have exact data on this, but they are supporting the manual underwriting for the loans that meet this criteria. So that is all I have. And Terry? I know those
Hi, everybody. My name is Terry Rain. I'm a local transactional real estate attorney. Thank you, Kathy, for inviting me to talk today. Some people ask what a transactional real estate attorney does, and my answer is I push a lot of paper and I never go to court. And I'm sure that's why all of you are here today. You want to be pushing paper and you never, ever want to go to court. Kathy asked me to give a legal update of recent cases and ordinances. Today I'm going to be talking about two fascinating cases that talk about the ugly tensions between landlords and tenants. Santa Cruz has a new tenant relocation ordinance, and I'm going to dive in a little deeper on that so you're aware of that. And finally, the excitement mounts with the new sanitary sewer ordinance in the city of Santa Cruz. So we are just going to have a great time. The first case is Bawa versus Terhune, and this was already mentioned today. This shows the extremes that a landlord will take to get rid of a tenant. This case took place in the city of Los Angeles, which has strict rent control ordinance and just cause eviction regulations. And the landlord was desperate to get the tenant out so he could charge more rent, of course. The tenant had a great deal. He was required to pay monthly rent of $507.61 a month. And this was way less than fair market value. In June of 2016, the tenant paid $507.60, you already heard about this today, 1 penny short. So the landlord sent the check back to the tenant and said, wow, we're returning your check. The amount paid is incorrect. The correct amount is currently $507.61. And a few days later, the landlord hit him with a 3-day notice to pay or quit, which is the commencement of an eviction action, right? Wow. During that 3-day period where legally the tenant has to pay, that's where you have to pay your rent in order to stop the eviction action. For some unknown reason, the tenant did not pay. Rats. And because the tenant didn't pay during that 3-day period and was penny short, the landlord filed an unlawful detainer action in Superior Court. The tenant, of course, filed an answer to the complaint saying, whoa, it was just a minor breach, man. And he said, also there were raised defenses of breach of habitability and implied a breach of the implied warranty of good faith and fair dealing. The case, of course, went to a full-blown jury trial. Wow, here we go, we're fighting over a penny. And the jury, and this is the one part that's so surprising, the jury found for the landlord. And it must have been some vile tenant, because normally these go for the tenants, but the jury found for the landlord. But of course, it isn't over at this point in time. The tenant appealed. And on appeal, the court says an eviction notice requires a default, of course. The landlord said, of course he was in default. He was a penny short and he didn't pay during the 3-day period. He's in default, he's out of there. But the court did not agree. The court says a trivial or a de minimis breach is not sufficient grounds for termination. Permitting landlords with superior bargaining power to forfeit leases based on trivial breaches would allow them to strategically defeat LA's rent control just cause eviction rules. The court yelled and said this is a pretext eviction and accused the landlord of trying to entrap the tenant into a technical breach of the lease. So, tenant wins. Tenant gets to go back. End of that one story. But you can see that any technical breach is not going to be sufficient grounds to terminate a lease in a situation where the landlord unreasonably refuses to accept rent. So now my next case is also really intense fighting between landlords and tenants. It's Beavis versus Terrace View Partners Limited Partnership. This is a mobile home park landlord-tenant case. Here the setup is all the tenants own their own coaches, and the landlord owns the land. This is not a resident-owned park, this is a landlord-tenant situation. The landlord leases out just the spaces and the utilities to the tenants. 69 former and current residents of the mobile home park called Terrace View Mobile Home Estates filed a lawsuit against the landlord and their property manager, naming 12 causes of action: nuisance, breach of contract, illegal change of use of park, negligence, intentional interference with property rights, breach of covenant of good faith and fair dealing, breach of statutes, breach of unfair competition law, breach of habitability warranty, breach of covenant of quiet enjoyment, elder abuse, right? Rescission and declaratory and injunctive relief. Wow, this was a big case. And the key focus in the case was the aggressive increases in rent. All long-term leases provided for a CPI increase annually plus 4%. Month-to-month leases were a CPI increase annually plus 5%, which are really, in my experience, pretty aggressive. But here's the real cool part that the landlord negotiated. He called this his catch-up provision. Not ketchup, catch-up.
Yeah.
In the 30th month of every person's lease, the rent would be adjusted to the average of the 3 highest rents in the park. So you could have these phenomenal increases and jumps without any anticipation. This was a problem for the tenants. The tenants were essentially stuck. One woman testified that she bought her home in 2006, but because of the high rent problem, she bought it for $86,000, her home, her coach. But because of the high rent problem, and she wanted to sell, she reduced the price to $69,000, nobody would buy. Then to $36,000, and still nobody would buy. And this went on and on and on. Again, they had so many people testifying about the hardships that these tenants were undergoing. And an expert witness appraiser at trial testified the negative effects of high rent on mobile homes' value destroys the value of the home when rents are so high. So, went to jury, and what do you think the jury did? The jury found intentional interference with property rights, breach of the covenant of good faith and fair dealing, nuisance, breach of contract, breach of the covenant of quiet enjoyment, and negligence per se. But they said the nice landlord was doing a good job providing common facilities, and he was not guilty of elder abuse. So, drum roll please. The jury awarded plaintiffs' economic, non-economic, punitive damages, and attorney's fees in the amount of $58.3 million.
Oh, wow.
$58.3 million. So, wow. That's a lot of tension between landlords and tenants. The court kind of said this is a bit excessive and probably not justified by the evidence. So it reduced the judgment to around $5 million. So it was quite a reduction. So the landlord, and here's what's kind of interesting to me, in all of these cases, the property manager is also named as a defendant in these cases. But in this case, the landlord and the property manager appealed. So the jury's award was based on high space rent. The Court of Appeal, when it was up on appeal, of course, reversed the decision, and it comes out kind of harsh to me. It says in jurisdictions not subject to local rent control, landlords have virtually unlimited discretion in setting the amount of rent for new tenants. Unlimited discretion. Wow. And although the mobile home residency law regulates the relations between the owners of mobile home parks and their tenants, it is not a rent control law. The Court of Appeal concluded that a property owner cannot be civilly liable for charging rent in an amount that was expressly allowed under the written leases. And it further said that the landlord is not responsible for a breach of the covenant of good faith and fair dealing because it was merely implementing the terms and conditions of the lease. It wasn't arbitrary arbitrarily doing things. It was following the written terms of the lease. So you can't be popped on the breach of the covenant of good faith and fair dealing. So there was a unqualified reversal of compensatory damage award, punitive damage award, and attorney's fees award, and the case was sent back to be retried in the trial court to actually follow the principles that the Court of Appeal had set down in this decision. So we, at the local front, are still fighting rent control, and the tensions in these two cases demonstrate why the fight is so intense. You all know on November 6th there was a resounding defeat of Measure M, yay, killing both rent control and just cause eviction. But immediately the city council adopted a new ordinance which pretty much would have put the old thing in place, and it was adopted as an ordinance. It did not pass the second reading though, so that's kind of sitting out there. It's on the books, but it's not really been adopted. At the same time, right around the defeat of Measure M, the city adopted a new ordinance called a Relocation Assistance Ordinance. And it's ordinance number 2018-20, Relocation Assistance for Displaced Tenants. Now there was always a relocation ordinance as long as I can remember. So if it was a substandard home, or if you were like renting out an illegal unit and you had to get them out of there, you had to pay 3 months fair market rent. The landlords were dinged if they had to force an unsafe condition if the tenants had to relocate. So this just modified it and said if there was a huge rent increase, and if the tenant doesn't like it, then the landlord has to pay 2 months rent, okay? So it's a large rent increase. The bottom line when you do the math is 6.9% in any 2 years. 5% in 1 year, for example, and then 1.9% in the next year. And for tenants who relocate due to a large rent increase, the immediate payment of 2 months' rent is required. This payment has to be made, unfortunately, before the tenant vacates. So you might have a situation where you do a 10% increase, and remember it's 6.9% in 2 years. If you do like even a 7% increase, and they say, I'm out of here, I can't afford it, it's too much for me to swallow. You have to pay that within 21 days after they say that they don't want to stay. And then if they don't leave when the time is up, they still have to go through the unlawful detainer eviction process.
Is that current rent, 2 months current rent, or market rent?
Well, it's different for the relocation, it's current rent, actual tenants, actual rent under this one. It's a different standard between the unsafe hazardous living conditions, and so it is actual rent.